My name is Emily Harris, and the house on Willow Crescent wasn't just a building. It was the center of my life. The place where I learned how to survive. The place where I learned what family meant. The place where I learned that love can be used as a weapon. I was 8 when my parents died in a car accident. My brother James was 12. The tragedy hit us like a storm. We lost our parents, our home, and our childhood in one night. But Grandma Elizabeth Harris didn't let us fall apart. She took us in. She didn't just give us shelter, she gave us a reason to keep living. Grandma was strict. Very strict. She believed in discipline, respect, and tradition. She had this old-fashioned idea of what a family should be. But she was also the most loving person I have ever known. She would wake up at 5 a.m. and make tea for everyone. She would bake bread on Sundays. She would sit with us, one by one, and talk to us about life like we were adults. The house itself was old and beautiful. It had tall windows, wooden floors, and a garden that always smelled like lavender. Every room had a memory attached to it. The living room was where we watched movies. The kitchen was where Grandma taught me how to make tea the proper way. The attic was where James and I hid when we fought. She used to say, "This house holds our memories. It holds our family. Never let it go." When Grandma passed away, the house didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a museum. Every room was filled with silence. The quiet was unbearable. It was the kind of silence that makes you feel like you're being watched. But the worst part was this: Grandma never made a will. She hated paperwork. She always said, "If it's meant to be, it will happen." So the house stayed in her name. It was still hers legally. But the responsibility fell on us. James moved in. He said it was only right. He said he was the older sibling. He said he would protect the house. He said he would take care of everything. He said he would make sure no one took it away from us. And because I was grieving, because I was broken, and because I needed someone to trust, I believed him. At first, everything seemed normal. James would call me and say, "Everything is fine, Em. Don't worry." He would send me photos of the house looking perfect. The garden was trimmed. The windows were clean. The house looked alive. But slowly, I began to notice changes. James started living differently. He started dressing better. He started going out more. He started spending money like he had it. He started acting like he was someone else. He started making excuses. "The boiler is broken. I need money to fix it. The roof has a leak. It's urgent. Council tax increased. I can't pay it alone." Every problem had a price. And every price had one solution: "Can you help me?" And I did. Because family helps family. Because I didn't want to be the sister who didn't support her brother. Because I didn't want to admit that I felt abandoned. But something didn't feel right. The way he asked didn't feel like a request. It felt like a demand. The way he spoke sounded rehearsed, like he had practiced his words. The way he avoided showing me bills and receipts made me suspicious. The house was supposed to be our inheritance. Our family legacy. Our last connection to Grandma. And it was slowly becoming a tool for James to live a better life. One day, I asked him directly, "Can you send me the receipts?" He laughed and said, "You really don't trust me, do you?" I said, "Of course I trust you." But I didn't. Not completely. Because the truth is, I started to feel like I was being manipulated. I started to feel like James was using Grandma's memory as a cover. I started to feel like he was using the house as a way to escape his own problems. And I didn't know how to prove it. I didn't know how to confront him without causing a fight. I didn't know how to fight back without destroying what was left of our family. So I stayed quiet. I stayed patient. I watched. And that was my first mistake. Because what I didn't know was this: James wasn't just spending money. He was planning something bigger. Something that would change everything. Something that would ruin our family forever. And I would find out soon enough. After the first few months, I began to notice a pattern. James's requests for money started to feel less like emergencies and more like a lifestyle. At first, I told myself he was just dealing with the house. Old houses need constant repairs. And after Grandma, I wanted to believe that James was doing the right thing. I wanted to believe he was the responsible one. But the truth is, he was acting like he was living in someone else's life. He started dressing better, going out more, and spending money like he had never had to think about it before. The kind of spending that makes you feel like someone is covering your bills. He never told me where the money was coming from. He never told me he had a job that suddenly paid well. He never told me he had a side business. He only told me the house needed repairs. And every time I asked for receipts, he acted like I was attacking him. "Why do you always doubt me?" he would say. "You think I'm stealing from Grandma?" I would respond, "No. I just want to see the bills." He would smile like he was being kind. Like he was being patient with a child. He would say, "I'm handling it. You don't need to worry." But I couldn't stop worrying. Something didn't feel right. The problem was, I couldn't prove it. I couldn't prove that James was lying. I couldn't prove he was using Grandma's house for his own benefit. I couldn't prove he was planning something bigger. So I did what I always do when I feel lost: I kept quiet and watched. And then, one day, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. I was walking past a small estate agency in the city center when I saw a flyer in the window. It was a listing for Willow Crescent. The house. My heart stopped. My hands shook. I looked closer. The picture was the house. The description was correct. The price was there. And the agent's number was written clearly at the bottom. I stared at it for a long time. My mind was racing. How could this be? How could James put our family home on the market without telling me? How could he do it without permission? How could he be so cruel? I walked into the estate agency, pretending to be a normal customer. I asked the agent about the house. I asked if they had spoken to my brother. He said, "Yes. We've been in contact with Mr. James Harris. He said he had the authority to sell the property." I felt like the ground had disappeared under my feet. I asked, "Did he show you any documents?" The agent smiled and said, "He showed us paperwork. We are waiting for final confirmation." Final confirmation. My brother was already halfway there. He was already convincing people that the house was his. And I was the one who had to stop him. I left the estate agency with my heart racing. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to start. I felt like my brother had betrayed me. My family. Grandma. Everything. That night, I called my aunt, Catherine Harris. Aunt Catherine was the only family member I trusted completely. She was the one who always stood by Grandma. She was the one who always spoke the truth, even when it was difficult. I told her everything. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just listened. Then she said something that I will never forget. I always knew James was hiding something. I felt a strange mix of relief and fear. Relief because I wasn't alone. Fear because I realized the problem was bigger than I thought. Aunt Catherine told me to contact the solicitor immediately. She said, "You need to protect the house. You need to stop him before it's too late." I didn't know how to contact the solicitor. I didn't know where to start. But I knew one thing, I was not going to let James sell Grandma's house. Not without a fight. Not without consequences. That night, I opened my laptop and started looking for property lawyers. I found Mr. Thomas Bennett, a solicitor who had worked with Grandma before. I called him. He answered on the first ring. He listened to me carefully, without interrupting. Then he asked one question, "Is your brother in debt?" I was stunned. "How did you know?" I asked. He said, "Because people who sell family property without permission are usually desperate. They are usually in debt." He told me to gather any documents I had. He told me to meet him the next day. I spent the rest of the night searching through old files and boxes. I found old council letters, property records, and a folder Grandma had asked me to scan years ago. I found a handwritten note in Grandma's handwriting. It said, "This house stays in the family. No one can decide alone." I read it again and again. I felt tears rising, but I didn't cry. Because I knew the next step. I knew I had to act. I knew I had to protect Grandma's legacy. And I knew I had to stop my brother. The moment I realized James was trying to sell Grandma's house without permission, something inside me changed. It wasn't anger at first. It was shock. Then betrayal. Then a cold determination that I didn't know I had. I couldn't stop thinking about the phone call I received that day. The man from the estate agency sounded polite. He sounded normal. He sounded like a businessman doing his job. But the words he said were like a knife in my chest. "We've been speaking with your brother. He said he has authority to sell the property." The thing is, James didn't have authority. The house was still in Grandma's name. And even if Grandma had passed away, the house still belonged to the family. It couldn't be sold without proper legal paperwork. But James had convinced a buyer. He had convinced a real estate agent. He had convinced people. And he was already halfway there. That night, I sat in my room, staring at the phone, thinking about everything. I kept replaying the conversation in my mind. Why would he do this? Why would he betray Grandma? Why would he betray me? The answer was simple: money. James was in debt. I didn't know how much, but I knew he was desperate. He had never been good with money. He always spent more than he earned. And after Grandma passed away, he started living like he had finally been given a chance to escape. He was using the house as a ticket. And he didn't care who he hurt. I decided I needed to act quickly. I couldn't wait for him to finish the sale. I couldn't wait for the house to be taken from us. So I called Mr. Thomas Bennett, the solicitor. He answered. I told him everything. I told him about the call. I told him about the estate agency. I told him about the paperwork James was showing. He listened carefully. Then he said something that made me feel a little better. "You have evidence," he said. "You have documents. You have a note. That's enough to file a restriction." I didn't understand what that meant at first. He explained, "A restriction prevents any sale or transfer until the legal situation is resolved." It basically freezes the property. No one can buy it. No one can sell it. Not until we sought the ownership. I felt a wave of relief. But I also felt fear. Because this would not be easy. James would not accept it quietly. He would fight. He would lie. He would try to destroy the evidence. And if he couldn't sell the house, he might try something worse. Mr. Bennett asked me to meet him the next day. He told me to bring everything I had. The next morning, I arrived at his office with a folder full of documents. It felt strange to be holding Grandma's papers like a weapon. It felt wrong. But I knew it was the only way to protect her legacy. Mr. Bennett looked through the documents carefully. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, "This is enough." He explained the process. We would file a restriction on the property. We would send a formal notice to James. We would also inform the estate agency and the potential buyer. He told me the buyer would likely back away once he knew the legal situation. But the most important part was this: your brother will know he cannot sell the house. I felt a chill. Because I knew James would not accept that. James was not the type of person to accept defeat. He would fight. He would try to get around the restriction. He would try to use the house as collateral. He would try to manipulate people. He would try to convince them he had the authority. And that's when I realized something. James didn't just want the house. He wanted control. He wanted power. He wanted to prove that he was the one who mattered. He wanted to show the family that he was the one who could decide. That he was the one who could take what he wanted. And he thought he could get away with it. But he didn't know me. He didn't know how far I would go. He didn't know that I was willing to fight. That night, I returned home and pretended nothing was wrong. I texted James like everything was normal. "How's the house? Did you get the new boiler fixed?" He replied quickly. "Everything is fine. Don't worry." I didn't respond. I didn't want to show weakness. I didn't want to show him I was worried. Because if he sensed fear, he would become stronger. So I stayed calm. I stayed silent. I waited. And then, the next day, I got a call from the estate agency. They said, "We received a notice. We cannot proceed." I felt a small victory. But I knew the real battle was still ahead. James would not give up easily. He would try to find another way. He would try to break the restriction. He would try to find another buyer. He would try to threaten people. He would try to destroy the evidence. And I had to be ready. Because this was not just about a house anymore. This was about my family. This was about Grandma. This was about respect. And it was about the truth. After the call from the estate agency, I felt a strange mixture of relief and fear. Relief because the sale had stopped. Fear because I knew James would not give up. He was the kind of person who never accepted defeat. He was the kind of person who believed that if he wanted something badly enough, he could take it, no matter who he hurt. That's when I realized I needed more than just a restriction. I needed proof. I needed evidence. I needed something that would show everyone the truth, even if James tried to lie. That night, I opened the folder Grandma had asked me to scan years ago. I didn't even know why she wanted me to scan the documents. I thought it was just a sentimental thing. But now, I realized she had been preparing me for this moment without me knowing. The folder contained ownership documents, council tax letters, bank statements, all property receipts, a handwritten note from Grandma. I started reading everything carefully. I was shocked by what I found. First, I found proof that the house was still in Grandma's name. No transfer. No sale. No legal authority for James to sell it. Then I found a note. It was written in Grandma's handwriting, "This house stays in the family. No one can decide alone." I read it again and again. I could feel her presence in those words. It was like she was speaking to me from the grave. It was like she was warning me. Then I found something else. A letter addressed to James. It was never sent. It was dated 6 months before Grandma died. In the letter, Grandma wrote, "James, I know you are struggling. I know you are in debt. But this house is not your escape. It is our family. You cannot sell it alone." My hands started shaking. She knew. She knew he was in debt. She knew he was planning something. And she tried to stop him. But she couldn't. And now, it was up to me. The next day, I went back to Mr. Bennett's office with the documents. He looked through them carefully. Then he said, "This is very strong evidence." He told me we could file a stronger case. We could file a legal challenge that would not only stop the sale but also prove James was acting illegally. He said, "We can also file a case for fraud." I felt a chill. Fraud. It sounded serious. It sounded dangerous. But I knew it was the truth. I asked him, "Will he go to prison?" He looked at me and said, "I can't promise that. But he will face consequences. He will lose the trust of everyone. And the court will not look kindly on someone who tries to sell a property they do not own." I felt a sense of power. I felt like I was finally in control. But then, a new problem appeared. James realized something was wrong. He started calling me constantly. He started sending messages. He started demanding answers. He tried to act like nothing was wrong. He said, "Em, why are you involved with the solicitor? Why are you acting like you own the house?" I didn't respond. I didn't want to give him any satisfaction. But his messages became more aggressive. He started saying things like, "You are ruining my life. You are making me look like a fool. You are destroying the family." And then, one night, he said something that made my blood run cold. "If you don't stop this, I will make sure you regret it." I knew he was threatening me. I knew he was trying to scare me. But I also knew something else. He was afraid. He was afraid because he knew I had evidence. He was afraid because he knew he was losing. He was afraid because he knew the truth was coming out. That night, I called Aunt Catherine. I told her everything. She didn't panic. She didn't cry. She just said, "We will not let him win." She told me to stay calm and let the law handle it. She said, "James is dangerous when he feels cornered." I realized she was right. James was not a man who could be reasoned with. He was a man who would fight until he got what he wanted. And the house was the thing he wanted most. So I did something that felt strange. I stopped trying to talk to him. I stopped responding to his messages. I stopped answering his calls. I let him rage alone. And I focused on the evidence. I focused on the truth. I focused on the fact that Grandma had left us a legacy. And I wasn't going to let James destroy it. The more I stayed silent, the more James grew angry. I could feel it through his messages. I could feel it through the way he was trying to control the situation. He wanted me to react. He wanted me to show fear. He wanted me to admit defeat. But I refused. Because I knew something he didn't. He was not the only one with secrets. And the truth was about to come out. One evening, I received a call from an unknown number. I hesitated before answering. But something inside me told me to pick up. "Hello," I said. A voice answered. It was a man. He sounded calm. He sounded controlled. He said, "Charlotte." I froze. I didn't recognize the voice. But he continued. "I'm calling because I know what your brother is doing." I felt my heart racing. "How do you know?" I asked. He said, "Because I work with him." My blood ran cold. "You work with him? Who are you?" I asked. He replied, "My name is Daniel. I'm a buyer's agent. I was hired by a client who wanted to buy the house." My stomach dropped. He said, "I've been watching the situation for a while. I saw the way your brother was acting. I saw the way he was trying to hide things. And I realized something, he's lying." I felt a strange relief. Because someone else knew the truth. And someone else was willing to help. Daniel said, "I don't want any trouble. I just want to do the right thing." I asked him, "Why are you calling me?" He said, "Because your brother asked me to help him. He said you weren't cooperating. He said you were causing problems. He said you were trying to ruin the sale." I felt sick. James was already lying about me. He was already manipulating the story. Daniel continued, "I'm not going to be part of this. I'm going to help you." He told me he had evidence. He had copies of messages. He had emails. He had documents. He said, "Your brother has been using fake paperwork. He's been forging signatures. He's been acting like he has authority." My hands started shaking. I asked him, "Can you prove it?" He said, "Yes. I can. But we need to meet." He suggested a public place. A cafe near the city center. He said, "Come alone. Don't tell anyone. Just come." I was scared. But I also knew this was my chance. This was my chance to finally get proof. This was my chance to expose James. So I agreed. The next day, I went to the cafe. I sat at a table near the window. I watched the door. My heart was beating fast. I saw a man walk in. He looked around. He walked towards me. He was tall, wearing a coat, and looked like someone who belonged in a corporate office. He sat down. He said, "You're Charlotte." I nodded. He placed a folder on the table. He said, "Everything you need is in here." I opened the folder. Inside, there were copies of messages between James and the estate agency. There were emails. There were documents. There were fake signatures. There was even a copy of a forged letter that James had sent to the agency. I felt sick. I couldn't believe he had gone this far. I looked up at Daniel. He said, "I didn't want to get involved. But I couldn't stand watching someone steal a family home." I asked him, "Why are you helping me?" He replied, "Because I believe in doing the right thing. Because your brother is not just breaking the law. He's breaking a family." I felt tears rising. I wanted to thank him. But I also felt angry. I said, I trusted him. I trusted him like a brother. I trusted him with Grandma. Daniel said, "I know. And I'm sorry." He stood up. He said, "I have to go. If James finds out I spoke to you, he will ruin me." I thanked him again. He left. I sat there for a long time. I didn't know what to do next. I had proof. But I didn't know how to use it. I decided to go straight to Mr. Bennett. I walked into his office with the folder. He looked through it carefully. Then he said, "This is enough to file a case." He told me we could use the evidence to prove fraud. He told me we could file a restraining order. He told me we could file a case that would force James to face the consequences. I felt a strange sense of relief. But I also knew this would not end the conflict. James would not back down. He would fight. He would try to destroy the evidence. He would try to hurt anyone who helped me. And I knew something else: James would come after me. He would try to ruin me. He would try to make me look like the villain. But I wasn't going to let him. Because I had proof. I had the truth. And I had the courage to use it. After the meeting with Daniel, everything changed. I wasn't just fighting to save Grandma's house anymore. I was fighting to expose my brother. And that meant James would stop at nothing. The next morning, I woke up to a flood of messages. Not from James. From strangers. People I didn't know. People accusing me. People calling me a liar. People calling me a greedy person trying to steal the house. The messages were vicious. They were cruel. They were designed to make me feel small. And I realized what James had done. He had already started the damage control. He had already started spreading lies about me. He was painting me as the villain. He was painting me as the one who was ruining the family. He was trying to destroy my reputation before the truth came out. I felt sick. I felt angry. I felt like I was losing control. But I knew I had to stay strong. I knew I had to stay focused. So I did something I never thought I would do. I went public. I posted a statement on social media. I wrote the truth. I wrote the facts. I wrote everything I could without breaking the law. I said, "My brother is trying to sell our grandmother's house without permission. I have evidence. I will not let him take our family home." The post received a lot of attention. Some people supported me. Some people criticized me. But I didn't care. I knew I was doing the right thing. Then, the worst thing happened. James showed up at my apartment. He knocked on the door. I didn't answer. He knocked again. He shouted my name. I could hear him through the door. "Charlotte. Open the door." I didn't respond. I stayed silent. I waited. He started banging the door. I felt my heart racing. I felt fear. I felt like I was trapped. Then I heard him say something that made my blood run cold. "I know where you work." I froze. He continued, "I know your address. I know your friends. I know everything." I felt a cold sweat. I knew he was threatening me. I knew he was trying to scare me. But I also knew he was desperate. He was desperate because he knew he was losing. He was desperate because he knew the truth was coming out. I called the police. I told them what was happening. They arrived quickly. James was gone by then. But the police took my statement. They told me to stay safe. They told me to change my locks. They told me to keep my phone with me at all times. I felt scared. But I also felt stronger. Because I knew I had done the right thing. I had stood up to him. I had refused to be intimidated. But the real fight was still ahead. Because the court case was approaching. Mr. Bennett told me the court date was set. He said, "You need to be prepared. Your brother will try to defend himself. He will try to act innocent. He will try to act like you are the one causing problems." I nodded. I knew he would. I knew James would try to manipulate the court. He would try to lie. He would try to convince the judge that he was the victim. But I had something he didn't. I had evidence. I had proof. I had the truth. The day of the court arrived. I felt nervous. I felt scared. I felt like my life was being judged. But I also felt determined. I walked into the courtroom. James was there. He looked calm. He looked confident. He looked like he was ready to win. He smiled at me. I didn't respond. I stared straight ahead. The judge called the case. Mr. Bennett presented the evidence. He showed the forged documents. He showed the messages. He showed the emails. He showed the note from Grandma. The judge listened carefully. Then he asked James a question: "Did you have permission to sell the property?" James paused. He looked nervous. He looked like he was about to lie. But then he said something that shocked me. He said, "Yes." The judge raised an eyebrow. He said, "Who gave you permission?" James hesitated. He looked around the courtroom. Then he said, "I was managing the property. I had authority." The judge shook his head. He said, "No. You did not. This property is not yours. You do not have the authority. Your actions are illegal." I felt tears rise. I felt relief. But the judge wasn't finished. He said, "I'm issuing a court order to freeze the property. No sale. No transfer. No action. Until this case is resolved." I felt a wave of relief. But then the judge added something that made my heart sink. He said, "I'm also ordering that you stay away from your sister." James looked angry. He looked like he was about to explode. The judge said, "This is for her safety." James stood up. He looked at me. He said, "This isn't over." I didn't respond. I just stared at him. Because I knew he was right. This wasn't over. The battle was just beginning. The courtroom felt like a battlefield. The judge's words echoed in my mind, "This is for her safety." I walked out of the courtroom with a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion. Relief because the court had finally recognized the truth. Exhaustion because the battle had drained me emotionally. But I knew the fight was not over. James was still out there. James was still angry. James was still dangerous. And he still believed he could get what he wanted. A week after the court order, I received a message from James. It was short. It was cold. It said, "You think you won. You don't know what I'm capable of." I stared at the message. I felt my heart pounding. But I also felt something else. I felt pity. Because I realized James was broken. He wasn't evil. He was desperate. He was a man who had lost control of his life. And now he was trying to destroy everyone else to regain control. I didn't respond. I didn't give him the satisfaction. But I knew I had to protect myself. I changed my locks. I moved to a new apartment. I stopped posting on social media. I stopped talking about the case. I kept my head down. I stayed safe. But the most important part was this: I continued to build evidence. Mr. Bennett told me we needed more proof to permanently stop James. He said, a temporary order is not enough. We need a final decision. So I kept collecting evidence. I kept talking to Daniel. I kept gathering messages. I kept building the case. And then, one day, something happened that changed everything. I received a call from Aunt Catherine. She said, Charlotte, you need to come home. I felt a strange fear. I asked, why? She said, your brother is here. I froze. My hands started shaking. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what he wanted. I didn't know if he was going to hurt someone. I went home. I arrived at Grandma's house. The door was open. The lights were on. I walked inside slowly. I felt a cold chill. Then I heard a voice. It was James. He was standing in the living room. He looked different. He looked tired. He looked broken. He said, Charlotte. I didn't respond. He continued, I didn't mean for it to go this far. I stared at him. I didn't say anything. He said, I just needed money. I just wanted a way out. I felt a wave of anger. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him he was selfish. I wanted to tell him he ruined everything. But I didn't. I stayed calm. I said, you didn't just want money. You wanted control. He looked down. He said, I know. I asked him, why did you do it? He looked up. He said, because I felt like nobody cared about me. Grandma always loved you more. Mom always favored you. You always had everything. I was always the forgotten one. I felt a strange sadness. Because I realized his pain was real. But his actions were not justified. I said, you could have asked for help. He shook his head. He said, I didn't want to be a burden. I felt my heart break. But I also felt something else. I felt power. Because I knew the truth was out. I knew the evidence was strong. I knew the court would not let him win. I said, you are not getting the house. He looked at me. He said, then what do you want? I looked at him. I said, I want you to admit what you did. I want you to apologize to Grandma. I want you to accept the consequences. He sighed. He said, fine. Then he did something that surprised me. He fell to his knees. He said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. I'm sorry for betraying Grandma. I'm sorry for hurting you. I felt tears in my eyes. But I didn't forgive him yet. Because I knew forgiveness wasn't a decision. It was a process. And he had a long way to go. I said, you will face the consequences. You will pay for what you did. But I will help you get back on your feet. Not by giving you the house. But by helping you rebuild your life. He looked up. He looked surprised. He said, why? I said, because you are my brother. And you are still family. He nodded. He looked like he was about to cry. I felt a strange peace. I realized something. The revenge wasn't about destroying him. The revenge was about protecting Grandma's legacy. The revenge was about exposing the truth. The revenge was about making sure justice was served. The revenge was about showing that family isn't a title. It's a responsibility. A few months later, the final court decision came. James was ordered to pay fines. He was ordered to attend counseling. He was ordered to stay away from the house. And the house remained in the family. Grandma's legacy was safe. I stood outside the house one last time. I looked at the front door. I felt a strange mix of emotions. Sadness, anger, relief, and hope. Because I knew the truth had won. And that was the best revenge of all.